Forget everything you think you know about Julius Caesar's death. It wasn't some noble, poetic end for a great leader. It was brutal, chaotic, and shockingly fast. This wasn't a dignified passing, it was a frenzied mob hit, carried out by the very men he called his colleagues, right in the heart of Rome. The setting for this gruesome act was steeped in a bitter, almost theatrical irony. The assassination didn't happen in a dark alley or a hidden chamber. It unfolded in broad daylight inside the temporary meeting place of the Roman Senate, at the foot of a grand statue of Pompey the Great. Pompey, Caesar's former ally, son-in-law, and ultimately his most formidable rival, whom Caesar had defeated in a bloody civil war just years earlier. As Caesar's life drained away, the cold marble eyes of his vanquished enemy were the last thing he would see. It was a final, silent testament to the cyclical nature of power and revenge that defined this era. The symbolism was heavy, a clear message that the ghosts of the past were never truly gone, and the civil war's wounds were still raw and festering beneath the surface of Roman politics. To understand why this happened, you have to understand the state of Rome itself. The city was a powder keg, politically unstable and teetering on the brink of total collapse. The Roman Republic, a system of governance that had endured for nearly 500 years, was dying. Its institutions, designed for a small city-state, were buckling under the weight of a vast, sprawling empire. Power had become dangerously concentrated in the hands of one man, Gaius Julius Caesar. After his victory in the Civil War, he had been granted unprecedented honors and authority. The final straw for many came when he was declared dictator perpetual, dictator for life. In a society that had overthrown its kings centuries ago and held a deep-seated fear of monarchy, this title was more than just a political designation. It was a death sentence. To the old guard of the Senate, the word king was poison. They saw Caesar's ambition not as a path to reforming a broken system, but as a direct assault on the very idea of the republic. The fear was palpable. Caesar, with his populist appeal and military might, was on the verge of dismantling their entire world and crowning himself an absolute ruler, and they believed they had to act before it was too late. Out of this climate of fear and paranoia, a conspiracy was born. The plot was masterminded by two very different men. Gaius Cassius Longinus, a bitter and pragmatic senator who had long resented Caesar's power, and Marcus Junius Brutus, a man respected for his integrity and lineage who claimed descent from the man who had expelled Rome's last king. Brutus was the key. His involvement lent the conspiracy a veneer of philosophical legitimacy. He wasn't driven by personal animosity. In fact, Caesar had pardoned him after the Civil War and treated him like a son. Brutus was convinced, however, that killing Caesar was a necessary patriotic evil. He believed he was acting not as a murderer, but as a liberator, sacrificing one man to save the Republic for millions. Together, Cassius and Brutus recruited a faction of around 60 senators. This was a broad coalition of the discontented. Former enemies Caesar had pardoned, ambitious politicians who felt overlooked, and staunch traditionalists who genuinely believed they were fighting tyranny. They swore a solemn oath, binding themselves together in a pact of blood, united by a single chilling purpose. On the Ides of March, they would kill Caesar, and in their minds, restore freedom to Rome. The conspirators' plan was audacious and deeply symbolic. They chose not to ambush Caesar in a dark alley or poison his wine. This was not to be a clandestine murder. It was intended as a public execution, a political statement delivered in the full view of the state. They decided to strike during a session of the Senate on the 15th of March, the Ides of March. By killing him in the Senate House, surrounded by his peers, they were framing the act not as a personal vendetta, but as a constitutional necessity, a tyrannicide sanctioned by the very body he sought to dominate. They believed the people of Rome would see them as heroes, as saviors who had rid the world of a would-be king. Yet, the plan almost unraveled before it even began, thanks to a series of warnings and omens that Caesar, in his characteristic arrogance, chose to ignore. On the night before the Ides, his wife, Calpurnia, was plagued by terrifying nightmares. She dreamt she was holding Caesar's bloody, mutilated body in her arms and wept uncontrollably, begging him not to attend the Senate meeting the next day. Her pleas were so desperate that Caesar, who was not typically superstitious, actually hesitated. The omens piled up. each one more direct than the last. For weeks, a well-known Etruscan soothsayer, a haruspex named Spurina, had been warning Caesar publicly, telling him to beware the Ides of March. On the morning of the 15th, as Caesar made his way to the Senate, he saw Spurina in the crowd. Feeling confident, Caesar called out to him mockingly, "The Ides of March have come." The seer's reply was chillingly calm. "Aye, Caesar, but not gone." The warning hung in the air, unheeded. At another point on his journey, a teacher of Greek philosophy named Artemidorus, who had learned of the conspiracy, thrust a small scroll into Caesar's hand. This was no ordinary petition. It was a detailed list containing the name of every single conspirator and a desperate warning to read it immediately and alone. But in the crush of the crowd, with petitioners vying for his attention, Caesar simply handed the scroll to his attendants to be read later. It was never opened. The fate of the Republic was sealed not by a sword, but by a piece of unread papyrus. Despite the omens and his wife's fears, Caesar was ultimately persuaded to go to the Senate by one of the conspirators themselves. Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus, a trusted general and a distant relative of the more famous Marcus Brutus, was sent to Caesar's home. When he found Caesar hesitating, Decimus played on his pride. He scoffed at the idea of the great Julius Caesar, conqueror of Gaul, being swayed by women's dreams and bad omens. He warned Caesar that if he failed to appear, the senators, who were planning to vote on a proposal to give him the right to be called king outside of Italy, would feel insulted and might change their minds. The bait was perfect. The fear of appearing weak and the appeal to his ambition were too much for Caesar to resist. He dismissed Calpurnia's fears and agreed to go. The final trap was now set. The Senate was meeting not in its traditional Curia Hostilia, which was under reconstruction, but in the temporary Curia of Pompey, part of the larger theater of Pompey complex. The conspirators had their man right where they wanted him. As the fatal moment approached, the conspirators executed their plan with cold precision. One key piece was to isolate Caesar from his most powerful and loyal ally, Mark Antony. A large, physically imposing man and a fellow consul, Antony could have easily defended Caesar. To prevent this, one of the conspirators, Gaius Trebonius, was tasked with intercepting Antony just outside the Curia. As Caesar entered the building, Trebonius engaged Antony in a seemingly important and lengthy conversation, detaining him and keeping him occupied while the bloody work was done inside. Unaware of the danger, Caesar walked into the Senate chamber. He was the picture of confidence, dressed in his purple-bordered toga and wearing the laurel wreath he favored, partly as a symbol of his victories and partly to conceal his thinning hair, a point of personal vanity. He took his seat on his gilded chair, greeting the senators who flocked around him. The irony was thick. Many of the smiling, friendly faces that now surrounded him belonged to men he had fought against in the Civil War, men he had shown clemency and pardoned, promoting them to positions of power. They owed him their careers, even their lives. These men, his supposed friends and allies, had come prepared for murder. They had devised a clever way to smuggle their weapons past any guards. Daggers were concealed inside their capsae, the cylindrical cases used for carrying scrolls and documents. To any observer, they were simply senators preparing for a day of legislative debate. With everyone in place and Mark Antony successfully delayed, the final act began. Caesar sat down, ready to commence the day's business. The stage was set, the actors were in position, and the audience of unsuspecting senators was about to witness the most infamous assassination in history. The signal was disguised as a routine petition. A senator named Lucius Tillius Cimber, whose brother had been exiled by Caesar, approached the dictator's chair. He knelt at Caesar's feet, ostensibly to beg for his brother's recall. As he pleaded, other conspirators crowded around, pretending to add their support to his petition. Caesar, annoyed by Cimber's persistence, waved him off, refusing the request. This was the moment they had been waiting for. With a sudden, decisive movement, Cimber grabbed Caesar's heavy toga with both hands and yanked it down from his shoulders. This was the prearranged signal. The act served two purposes. It exposed Caesar's neck and chest, making him vulnerable, and it pinned his arms, preventing him from defending himself. The first blow came from behind. Publius Servilius Casca, who had been standing just behind Caesar's chair, lunged forward with his dagger. But in his nervousness, his hand trembled. The blade missed its intended target, the neck, and instead inflicted a shallow, grazing wound near Caesar's shoulder. It wasn't a fatal strike, but it drew blood and shattered the tense quiet of the Senate. Startled and enraged, Caesar spun around. He saw Casca, dagger in hand, and his reaction was one of pure instinct and fury. "Casca, you villain! What are you doing?" he shouted in Latin. In that moment, he was still the formidable general. He fought back, stabbing at Casca's arm with the only weapon he had, his stylus, a sharp, pointed iron pen used for writing on wax tablets. The blow was strong enough to wound Casca, who recoiled in pain and shock. The meticulously planned, dignified assassination had instantly devolved into a chaotic, desperate brawl. Terrified, Casca screamed out, but not in Latin. In a moment of panic, he reverted to his native Greek, crying, "Adelphi boete! Brother, help me!" This cry of desperation became the unintentional, frantic signal for the rest of the conspirators to attack, and all at once, the pack descended upon their cornered prey. The scene is the Senate House. Suddenly, chaos erupts. A mob of senators, daggers flashing, descends upon Caesar. It's a frenzy of steel and shouting. Cassius strikes first, slashing Caesar across the face. In the confusion, some conspirators even stab each other by mistake. Caesar, a seasoned general, fights back fiercely at first, but blinded by his own blood and completely surrounded, he stumbles. And that's when he sees him. Through the press of bodies, he locks eyes with Marcus Brutus, not just a fellow senator, but a man Caesar loved like a son, a man he had mentored and forgiven. And in Brutus's hand is a dagger, ready to strike. This is the moment that shatters him. Shakespeare gave us the immortal line, "Et tu, Brute?" You too, Brutus. But historical sources suggest Caesar might have said something even more heartbreaking in Greek, "Kai su teknon," which means, "You too, child." Seeing Brutus there, poised to betray him, extinguished Caesar's will to live. His fight was over. In a final act of dignity, he pulled his toga over his head, choosing to meet his end without anyone seeing his face. He collapsed at the foot of a statue of his old rival, Pompey the Great, a truly ironic final resting place. The aftermath was just as dramatic. The autopsy later revealed 23 stab wounds, but only one had been fatal, a deep thrust to the chest. When Caesar fell, a stunned silence filled the chamber, quickly broken by screams of panic as the remaining senators fled in terror. Brutus tried to give a rousing speech to explain that they had acted as liberators, not murderers. He declared, "Tyranny is dead," but no one stayed to listen. The great hall was empty, his words echoing to no one. The public was horrified, not inspired by their act. Instead of celebrating the return of the Republic, the people of Rome mourned Caesar. They saw him as their champion, and his death sparked a massive backlash. The conspirators, who called themselves the Liberators, quickly found themselves to be the most hated men in Rome. What followed wasn't freedom, but another brutal civil war. One by one, the assassins were hunted down and killed, including Brutus and Cassius. And here's the ultimate irony. The assassination designed to prevent one man from holding absolute power directly led to the rise of an emperor. The power vacuum left by Caesar was filled by his young, brilliant heir, Octavian. After defeating his rivals, Octavian would become Augustus, the very first emperor of Rome, and the Republic was gone for good. They killed a man they feared would become a king, but in doing so, they gave birth to an empire that would last for centuries. It's a powerful lesson from history about unintended consequences. What do you think? Was it a necessary evil or a tragic mistake? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy deep dives into history like this one, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next video.